Estamos ya. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Commissioner, ministras, secretarias de Estado.
General, ministers, authorities.
In this event, in which we aim to raise awareness in favor of the Council of Europe's Convention to preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence on its 10th anniversary. Lo sabemos todos y todas, this is the first legally binding instrument for the construction of a proper framework to fight against this form of violence. So we are in a perfect moment and setting to look back and reflect upon its results and to reaffirm the importance of our commitment. In short, we are here to highlight the permanent value of the collective effort that we should help to ensure in order to protect women and girls from gender violence. Así que, ministras, gracias por la invitación para que todos podamos escuchar las conclusiones, los análisis después de estos 10 años del Convenio de Estambul, de todos los que estáis involucrados en su seguimiento. Muchas gracias, cuando quieras.
Muchísimas gracias, Majestad, Secretaria General, Comisaria, Ministro, Ministras. Es un placer estar con todos vosotros esta tarde aquí y a todos los que nos estáis siguiendo en retransmitido, un caluroso abrazo. Quiero empezar con un recuerdo hacia las tres víctimas.
I'd like to start remembering the three victims of gender violence we've had in Spain this week, which demonstrates how important the event that we are celebrating today is.
Council of Europe, thank you, Secretary General, for being with us today. Our societies took a decisive step in the fight against violence and discrimination against women and girls. The most ambitious, the most comprehensive instrument internationally for the protection and prevention of violence against millions of women and girls was adopted. And it was done in the city of Istanbul. On that day, we began a path to a safer, free, and just world for women and girls and for all our societies. Today, it's opportune that we reflect on that path. It's not been a straight line. It's not been a road free of obstacles, and we haven't really reached the destination. And frankly, COVID-19 has added to an already bad situation. We have regressed. The pandemic has represented for millions of women and girls around this world a particular hell that has aggravated and exacerbated the cases of violence and abuse suffered very often in silence. España impulsó la elaboración y la...
Spain sponsored the adoption and the drafting of the convention 10 years ago, and with this same commitment we felt then, we are now committed with the assessment and monitoring mechanism. Our country's assessment, which took place last year, showed results that indicated some progress, particularly the regulatory front with pioneering legislation and strong commitment with prevention policies and victim support systems, not just for women in Spain, but also abroad. The data, I think, demonstrate what I was saying. We're moving forward, but very, very slowly. Too many women and girls are still suffering due to the absence of effective mechanisms to charge their attackers, and they lack hope of being able to live their lives free of violence. Also, it's an obstacle to growth in the European Union, and I'm sure that the Commissioner will be speaking about this as well. We know that we lose 0.8% GDP growth simply due to the violence and the abuses suffered by women. Inequality has a cost in terms of economic growth and progress as well. And Spain has intensified its efforts to promote the ratification of the Convention by our European partners. Recently, Liechtenstein completed its ratification process. Our meeting today reflects the importance of having shared leadership if what we truly want is to change the lives of millions of women and girls on the ground. Now is the time, and this is the way to do so, by working together to continue to promote this convention in Europe, in Spain, and being from Europe a model for the rest of the world. I want to thank all of our guests.
With us today, it's a pleasure to see many familiar faces. Y ahora quisiera darle...
I'd like to give the floor to the Minister of Equality of Spain, Irene. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ministers. Madam Secretary General, Commissioner, dear Elena, Ministers, and all authorities here with us today. I would also like to start off, as the Minister has before me, by condemning those the 3 murders by women killed by men. There was, in just 24 hours, a 28-year-old woman, the Balearic Islands, her 7-year-old son, also a 52-year-old woman. It's absolutely essential that we remember these women. They're not alone, and that all of the institutions that are here represented in Spain and Europe are committed to fighting and combating any form of violence against women. Thank you very much to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Spain for hosting this event, for organizing it. We are here representatives of different Spanish institutions, as well as members of and representatives of European institutions, to show that common feminist front. We are working together. We are determined to eradicate all forms of violence by men against women. I think this is a very delicate time for us right now for the rights of women. We are very much concerned at seeing how Turkey is withdrawing from the Istanbul Convention. Some countries in Europe haven't ratified the convention either. We've also witnessed the dreadful consequences for women of the social and health emergency. That has also prompted more violence, and we've seen that the violence itself has turned into different forms, difficult to monitor, to check on. It's also had an economic effect on women. It's also had an effect on their employment. We must be aware of the tricky time we're living in and how there is this step back with regard to many of the rights that women have. There is this regression, and I think we have to turn that message on its head now. We have to ensure that this concern can be turned into hope. Europe cannot also take steps back. The Istanbul Convention, 10 years on from its ratification, is still the best possible instrument to guarantee the human rights of women everywhere. And I also believe that there is a message of hope in it, also because women are society. More than half of the population in Spain and Europe quite often are one step ahead of legislation, and they are the ones showing us the road, the way forward for us as an institution. We've seen all the demonstrations of women out there saying, not one single woman left. And we've seen how people have gone at that and supported the victim of the Wolfpack gang rape, but women fighting for their right to abortion, fighting against all forms of male attacks on them. We believe that we are in the forefront of democratic battles, and that is absolutely essential to guarantee all human rights, the human rights of all women. One example is that we are trying very hard as institutions to get that new European-wide 016 helpline for all women. In the case of Spain, as the Minister has already said, Spain ratified the Istanbul Convention back in 2014, and I believe that we have the honor of being one of the countries in Europe that has made most progress. That has been, I believe, recognized by the Grevio monitoring mechanism because of our law on equality, 2004, and also our state pact on measures against violence. And I think we are now in the forefront of that fourth wave as institutions, and that feminist movement that we're seeing worldwide. we have been categorical in the way we've acted during the health emergency. We've put together a contingency plan that has been congratulated and welcomed by the United Nations to try and protect all victims of gender violence. We've also broadened out that scope of violence. We also have that emotional support, psychological support that we've been offering women in these particularly difficult times. As I said, when they are facing all forms of violence. With regard to data collection, we've also done a lot of work there. Going back to the last government, there was a macro survey that was conducted. That is, I believe, the biggest study that's been done to gather data to find out exactly what the reality is with regard to violence against women. One out of every 2 women have suffered some form of violence against themselves. And we're now working on gathering data on trafficking and sexual exploitation of women, and this will paint a picture for us of what is happening in the country. We will also have to modernize the protection and support mechanisms, those electronic tagging mechanisms, the monitoring systems, the ankle bracelets. We believe that perhaps in just a month's time, very shortly, we'll be able to take to our Parliament the integral law on sexual liberty. That also goes back to Article 36 of the Istanbul Convention with regard to consent. There can be no sexual relation without an explicit stated consent to that relationship on the part of the people involved. If there's a doubt, then you have to actually cease in that sexual relationship. But we also have to talk about redress and reparation. We need to also broaden out that to all forms of violence by men against women. And in our legislation, it's quite clear that women who are victims of male violence are victims and they have rights, and we are there as institutions to guarantee the exercising of those rights. We're working through the European Union funds, through the Transformation, Recovery and Resilience Fund, to work on the 24-hour rape crisis centres, also stated in the Istanbul Convention, and you'll hear from the Attorney General in Spain about the work that we have to do to ensure we can implement that state pact and also the Istanbul Convention to make sure that our judiciary is quite clearly feminist in its perspective. We're on the right track. We will not wait another 10 years to be able to implement the Warsaw Convention. I think with the measures that we've set out, we are on the way to that. Then we need to ensure that there is no impunity for the people who take women into prostitution. We also have to protect those women who are being sexually exploited using the European Union funds. I think this will be a pioneering and groundbreaking policy to defend the rights of women who suffer from that form of violence. We need to be able to, we won't be able to ban and prohibit prostitution or this form of exploitation without moving forward with the rights of the victims. We also need to train every single agent involved in this system. And just to finish up, I would like to talk about the conventions that are outside our scope. It's important when we're actually looking at financial violence and political violence against women. And let me finish off by reading out a statement made by one of our colleagues in the Ministry of Equality. She's an advisor, one of the top experts in Spain, Barbara Tadon. She says that the exercise of believing the victims of male violence against women is one of the most radical political acts that we can perform as feminists, as a society, and as institutions. And we have a lot of work to be done, but I'm pretty sure that united together we'll be able to achieve our goal and be able to eradicate violence against women. Thank you very much. Minister, Irene.
To the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Marija Pejčinović-Burić. The elaboration of the convention 10 years ago was a milestone, but a lot has happened since it was adopted. A campaign of disinformation, misinformation, and resistance on the part of some groups and some governments risk the determination to advance which was the essence of the convention when it was adopted. So, Marija, this is the question to you. Why is this convention as important today as it was 10 years ago, and how do we go about making it the norm for everybody?
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, dear Your Majesty, Ministers, Commissioner Dalli, dear friends. Just last week, on the 11th of May, we marked the Istanbul Convention's 10th anniversary, and over the course of these past 10 years, Spain's commitment to that treaty has been clear and absolute, as we heard from both ministers. Signing in 2011, ratifying in 2014, and benefiting from its force in law from the summer of that year, this has been a central part of the country's broad and groundbreaking movement towards a zero-tolerance policy on violence against women. And I'm grateful for your personal commitment, Minister González-Laya, something that has been very obvious in our one-to-one conversations. The treaty itself has always been direct in its aims to prevent violence against women, to protect those who become victims, and to ensure the persecution of perpetrators. It not only encourages integrated policymaking, it also criminalizes specific offenses such as stalking, forced marriage, and female genital mutilation. And where it has been implemented, it has worked with positive changes to national laws. Spain's story is a real testament to this. In November of last year, the Council of Europe's monitoring body, Grevio, published its first evaluation report of your country's implementation of the Istanbul Convention, and it outlined the many positive steps that have been taken. I will repeat some that already the minister said, but I think it's worthwhile. Take example of the organic law on integrated protection measures against gender violence. Similarly, Grevio congratulated Spain on its state pact on gender-based violence, a 5-year roadmap to further implementing the Istanbul Convention by means of staggering 481 individual measures. And it recognized the efforts that have gone into producing and publicizing statistics through which transparency is achieved and progress can be measured. The report also identifies areas where more can be done, something that Grevio has done in all its country reports. For Spain, examples include widening the approach taken towards intimate violence and applying it to other forms of abuse too, closing gaps between policy and service provision between regions, and ensuring funding for women's NGOs so that they can provide services to victims and give feedback that is considered in the policy-making process. In each of these areas and others, I know that work is already underway, and I congratulate the authorities on their positive approach. Some of these countries' most vulnerable women will benefit directly as a result. I also would want to make a special mention of the measures that the government put in place in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In March of last year, I warned Council of Europe member states that while lockdowns were necessary, they would expose women to heightened risks. Living with an abuser is a terrible thing, but being confined with one is even worse. The Council of Europe has worked hard to help national authorities to respond to problems like this. We have created a dedicated website on which governments and other actors can share best practice, and the fast, proactive measures taken by Spanish government are featured there. Among these, the contingency plan against gender-based violence featured important measures given the unique and challenging circumstances, declaring as essential all comprehensive assistance services for victims, launching a prevention and awareness campaign, and setting up a 24/7 WhatsApp service connecting those in need with psychologists trained in gender-based violence. This positive approach tells the story of a country that understands both the requirements and the spirit of the Istanbul Convention. But alas, as you said, it is not alike this across all of Europe today. A decade ago, this new treaty generated justifiable, widespread enthusiasm. It took just 3 years to gather the signatures required to enter into force. It went on to be ratified by 34 of the Council of Europe 47 member states. And from outside the Council of Europe, Tunisia and Kazakhstan have requested to join it and are on their way to doing so. Nonetheless, something has gone wrong. In some countries, false narratives are being used against the Istanbul Convention. It is being portrayed as a political agenda rather than a human rights tool. And this, in turn, is feeding reluctance to join and, in some cases, support for leaving the convention. Many of you will know, and it was already mentioned, that the Turkish authorities announced their decision to this effect in March. I have already spoken about this on several occasions, but it is important to repeat that the reasons given are misleading. The sole purpose of the Istanbul Convention is to protect women and girls from violence. It has nothing to do with so-called gender ideology. And whether Turkey or any other country has strong domestic laws in this area, there is no substitute for multilateral action on this international problem. The Council of Europe represents a collective system of human rights protection, of international law established in the wake of the Second World War. To undermine this approach would weaken international organizations and strike a fatal blow to the multilateralism that has been so important and effective in protecting Europeans for over 70 years. The best answer to recent events is to expand the circle of those committed to the treaty. This means developing the positive and honest narrative that supports the Istanbul Convention, highlighting facts, dispelling myths, standing up for women. This narrative will be based on three clear facts. First, the standards for the protection of women set out in the Istanbul Convention are higher than national laws in many countries. Second, it provides a unique, independent, and international monitoring mechanism to evaluate the implementation at national level and assist compliance. And third, by withdrawing, a country can no longer benefit from the treaty's provisions relating to international cooperation in criminal matters and seek cooperation from other states parties to bring perpetrators of crimes against women and girls to justice. What we have here is a treaty that provides a level of cooperation and protection that is only possible with a multilateral approach. Yes, Spain is doing great. And it is right that we recognize the efforts that are being made, sometimes in the face of opposition. But you are doing this under the umbrella of an international human rights treaty, which promotes progress and shares the benefits wherever it comes into force. So we need this country, we need you, we need like-minded people all over Europe to keep the faith and to work together in making the case for the Istanbul Convention to stop the backsliding on ending violence against women and girls. After all, the United Nations describes it as a gold standard international treaty. And in a world where 1 in 3 women has been subject to violence, it has more work to do. We have much achieved over the past 10 years. Together, we can achieve more still. Thank you for your commitment, your ongoing efforts, and for providing this opportunity to celebrate what the Istanbul Convention has done for women, and especially what more it can go on to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, for these very clear words. We really appreciate, and thank you also for your leadership on this fight. Voy a darle la palabra. Ha mencionado Maria.
Maria has mentioned justice, and I'd like to thank the Spanish Attorney General, Dolores Delgado, for being here with us this afternoon. Spain does have a very sound structure to combat and respond to violence against women, and the judiciary is a very important part of the answer, particularly the role of those specialized judicial institutions here in Spain. You're a specialist yourself, you're an expert, aren't you? We're very keen to hear from you. What can we offer other countries? What can we do here in a country like Spain that has already done so much? Well, thank you very much, Majesty, Your Majesty, ministers, authorities, friends. Yes, you're right. Spain has been a benchmark. It is a benchmark in combating gender-based violence. And in that battle, as we do try to combat that violence, and here we are, of course, commemorating the 10th anniversary of the Istanbul Convention. I would say the Istanbul Convention has been an ally here in Spain, and it's so important. We need instruments, we need legal mechanisms, not only domestic instruments, but also international ones, so that we can operate and act under this broad umbrella. And I have to say, and I say that with lots of pride, that we in our judiciary have been at the forefront of that fight against gender-based violence, and we've done that in our institutions, and we've done that by respecting human rights. Of course, that is the way we have to act. We have, I believe, been in the vanguard, at the forefront. The Minister herself said that just before, because we are a specialized body in this particular area, and also thanks to the fact that we have had some domestic legal instruments, not just international ones like the Istanbul Convention, but also ones in our own domestic legislation. I would like to mention that organic law for integral measures against gender-based violence. That's 2004, so that's almost 17 years ago already when that piece of legislation was passed. That was when Spain decided that it was time to regulate this area, and that helped us in the judiciary to then act, but also to ensure that we actually had effective equality between men and women. And that was back in 2007. So we also had that piece of legislation to keep us moving forward. And we also have to talk about that comprehensive pact, the state pact, that is 2019. Very recently, but it is a commitment that was made by institutions and also by the representatives of the people, of society and citizens themselves, who came together to commit to fighting this scourge. So we have that structure there, and we have the necessary legal fabric that has been put together to combat this violence. We have also taken big steps forward, but we shouldn't sit down and relax. As we've already heard, we have threats ahead of us. There are dangers there when gender-based violence against women, and when equality, all of this is used as a political battlefield, then we face the danger of the pushback, of the backsliding. We have to be vigilant. We have to be ready to work in other areas, such as education, which is absolutely essential for prevention. We have to work with society so that we can protect, support, and be beside the victims. And also, on the judicial side, we also have to try and make sure that we can prosecute and sanction and punish anyone committing these offences of violence against women, to ensure that we can work towards equality and also to defend our dignity. I'd also like to highlight something that is key, and that is the importance of awareness raising in society, among citizens, because if people can reject and condemn that sort of behavior, violence against women, then if we could get all of society to come together, everybody to reject that sort of behavior, then that would help us to move forward in this fight. It's absolutely essential to offer unconditional support to victims so that they can have access to resources that will help them to break the ties with the perpetrators of the violence against them and help to move forward. We've already heard mention today of the last 3 murders. Since 2003, 1,090 women, that's since we've been counting them, who have died at the hands of a man. Already 12 this year. Sometimes the figures are just numbers, aren't they? They sound very cold, and we can't really convey what is behind these numbers, but all of us know that behind those numbers there is pain, there is despair, there are terribly painful circumstances, but above all, what there is behind these numbers is inequality. Because we have been born as women, there is a stigma attached to us. We are not equal, and purely because of that fact, and for that reason, we have to speak out. And there are also, behind those women who have suffered violence, children, minors, and we should just remember the last the 3 children, 7, 11, and there was a 22-year-old. Those who were children, those young people were also murdered together with their mothers, and that is one of the most dreadful, terrible faces of violence, these forms of violence which isn't just against women, but it's against the families, it's against the children, the sons and the daughters. They are all victims of this brutal violence, because this is an attack on human rights, attack on our dignity. And so I would also like to say the affectionate mention of those women, and also turn to those women and men and children who have suffered that violence. So this is the road that we are on. We are using every effort we can make institutionally. Every woman, every group, of course, requires an individualized, individual-specific answer. That is what the Istanbul Convention says too. Those endeavors have to be real and effective. We can't just make statements or put this down on paper in black and white. We have to go beyond that. We have to act. There has to be tangible actions that people can see and feel the effect of. So we, in my Internal General's office, heading the specialized section in our judiciary, are working to stop violence against women. I personally have spent my whole life in this area, and through our specialization, Teresa Bermata, we have been able to do work that has proven the progress we've made, and that is why we're a benchmark country. It has already been said, I think it was the Minister of Equality mentioned the fact that we have a concern, and that is Turkey's withdrawal from the convention. We're very worried about that, because the reason why the convention is important is because it is that umbrella, the international umbrella that we have. That's why we wanted to highlight for you the importance of the convention and state here once again our solidarity with women and girls in Turkey. From Spain, let me say that you will always be able to rely on institutions in Spain and women and girls in Spain to support you, because we are all the same. We should act as one. We in the State Attorney General's office will continue to and determinedly to move forward in specialization, in training, in awareness raising, and working together with all other institutions, both here in Spain and internationally, so that Spain continue to be, because it is, a benchmark in this fight. And it's not just a fight that women have to take forward, it's our fight. All of us have to be part of that. This is a universal fight for rights and for dignity, something as important as equality. So thank you so much for this event and for inviting me to join you. Thank you so much for all of the work we're all doing. Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you to Teresa for this tireless work that's been done by Justice.
For women, family, and the elderly of the Republic of Tunisia. Imen Sawani Wimel. Bonjour, Madame la Ministre.
Bonjour.
Tunisia has joined the Istanbul Convention through the special procedure that the Convention has, and we really appreciate the fact that Tunisia, by joining this Convention, is showing leadership also in the region. A region where this issue of violence against women is also an issue. Minister, we would like to hear from you. What advice would you have for others that are willing or maybe tempted but not yet there? What have you seen in this convention that we should use to lure others to join?
Thank you very much. Honorable ministers, dear participants, It's an honor and a pleasure for Tunisia to be among the countries participating in the 10th anniversary of the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, the Istanbul Convention. And it's an opportunity that allows us to demonstrate our commitments to an egalitarian world and to the protection of women's rights and protection against all forms of discrimination and violence. We are also proud to share with you Tunisia's experience in combating violence against women and our accession process to Istanbul Convention. First of all, I would like to remind you that Tunisia has, since its independence, promoted and set up an egalitarian policy between women and men, and adopted and ratified almost all international treaties and conventions, in particular CEDAW, the Maputo Protocol, and Lanzarote. Since 2013, by adopting a participatory approach, we have carried out a series of awareness-raising activities at national and regional level in order to popularize and explain the Istanbul Convention. This process was crowned in 2019 by our official request to adhere to it. On the other hand, the Ministry of Women, Family and the Elderly I am sharing is the main national mechanism in charge of gender equality. It strives to achieve through gender mainstreaming in the planning and budgeting strategies and programs. For this purpose, and at the strategic level, the Ministry has set up several strategies elaborated and adopted in a participatory way. Among these strategies is the strategy for combating violence against women and girls, adopted in 2008, reactivated in 2012, and reviewed recently in light of Organic Law number 58 of 2017 about the elimination of violence against women. I note here that we were inspired by the Istanbul Convention in the elaboration of this law. Our law responds to the first aim of the Convention, in particular the protection, prevention, prosecution and elimination of violence against women as well as domestic violence. It's in harmony with constitutional provisions, international standards, and good comparative practices and universal values which relate particularly to the protection of human rights. The strategy has a proactive and modern vision, focused on the victim, takes into account the chance and crisis the world is witnessing, has a content that is in tune with these crises, disasters, and the COVID pandemic. It also consolidates, harmonizes, and develops the mechanism likely to put an end to violence against women with an approach of participation and sustainability of action. This new strategy was not limited to the care to victims and condemning aggressions, but went beyond to tackle the causes and take into account violence perpetrators in a process of prevention and protection, and to involve particularly men as agents of change and holders for the protection of victims. At the same time, we also established in 2020 the National Observatory of Violence Against Women and set up cross-sector coordination mechanism in the country's 24 governorates. These mechanisms constitute an opportunity to set up a coordination work methodology at the regional level, bringing together the various intervening actors and local NGOs and taking in consideration each region's specific aspects. At the national level, And in order to capitalize and coordinate all stakeholders' efforts, we have set up a multidisciplinary committee which includes public agencies and civil society organizations to ensure monitoring of the compliance to law number 58 on the one hand, and to act as an advocacy force and as a factor of change for better governance on the other hand. In connection with support mechanisms, the Ministry has set up a toll-free assistance line 1829 for listening to and counseling women victims, and another helpline 1809 for psychological support to families members during the COVID pandemic. In the third part, as I already said earlier in the speech, the Ministry launched since 2019 the process of acquiring membership status to the Istanbul Convention. We have, of course, finalized the membership procedures and have submitted the ratification project to the Assembly of the People's Representatives for validation, which I hope will be published soon. This result was achieved following consultation with public institutions and civil society. We believe that the content of the Convention does not contradict our organic law, and we are convinced that combating gender-based violence is a fundamental issue. We also believe that civil society organizations have an important role in advocacy, and I would like to thank our partners from public institutions, from NGOs, and particularly from the Office of the Council of Europe, who accompanied us and assisted us in this process. But the process is still long and the challenges are many. We have work to do with men as a preventive action, work to do with legal institutions to protect victims and rehabilitated aggressors, and work coordination to be deepened for a better response for victims' sake. So we recommend to keep up with advocacy for the elimination of violence against women, involve and have more men participate in the process, and ensure the rehabilitation of perpetrators to avoid re-offense. Also implement prevention and public awareness strategies using different messages and responding to the diversity of the public. Also, involve young people, media, educational institutions in the process of prevention, awareness, and protection. Also, involve the private sector as much as possible in this process. It's very important. Improve coordination between all stakeholders, be they public structures or NGOs. Acquire innovative means and digital technology to support victims, guarantee their psychological stability and economic empowerment, and share good practices and success stories in order to highlight them. We are confident that with the coordination of all states and the efforts of civil society, youth, and private sector, we will move forward towards the goal we are all striving to achieve. Our ultimate goal being that all women enjoy equal rights and have access to equal opportunities. Finally, I reiterate my thanks to Council of Europe for this opportunity and for continual support. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. C'était très utile et très riche. Let me now turn to the European Union. And we do have an obligation of leadership in the European Union as part of Europe. We also face challenges, and it's these two angles that I would love Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ireland, Simon Coveney. Simon, I would really love you to address them. You are the man in this panel, and we know that this is not just about women. Talking about women and girls is also about men and societal change. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Arantxa, and Your Majesty, Ministers, Commissioner, Secretary General, and ladies and gentlemen. Can I begin by thanking Her Majesty Queen Letizia. Your participation as chair of today's event, I think, really does underscore the priority that you and your country, Spain, attaches to the prevention and elimination of violence against women and girls. Indeed, in many ways, it's these shared values recognized in the emphasis on equality in our treaties that has enabled the EU to flourish in the face of a lot of difficult challenges. Sadly, today, though, these values are under attack by some. We live in an age of disinformation and so-called cultural wars. Too often, the fundamental purposes of initiatives are ignored in favor of a debate on what are often imagined hidden agendas. This is what we're witnessing now with the Istanbul Convention. The Convention provides a comprehensive framework to prevent, prosecute, and eliminate violence against women and domestic violence, violence such as physical and psychological abuse, sexual violence, and FGM. The Convention recognizes the facts that there is a gender dimension to this violence, which is primarily carried out by men against women, and that this structural element means that changes are needed to our systems in terms of policing, courts, and social services. And yet in some quarters, the debate about the Convention is not about this violence. Instead, the debate is about family values, with the Convention falsely portrayed as a means of undermining the family. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I say that as a very proud father of 3 daughters. On the basis of the facts, Ireland and Spain, together with like-minded partners, are already working to do this. Last week, for example, opinion pieces were published in newspapers in Spain and in Ireland, co-signed by Spanish and Irish ministers, along with colleagues from 13 other EU states. Moreover, in countries that have not yet ratified the Convention or are contemplating withdrawal in some cases, we are all working together to counter myths about the Convention and to promote its real value. In fact, the Istanbul Convention has never been more important as a means of promoting best practice, to protect victims and to punish perpetrators. It is horrifying that one impact of this pandemic has been an increase in domestic violence, not just in Europe, but globally. In Ireland, we did try to respond quickly with targeted measures to protect victims. We were able to mount a multi-agency response involving the courts, the police, and support services, in part because of the steps we had taken to enable ratification of the Istanbul Convention previously. We have seen firsthand the value of ratification for victims. So friends, we must continue to work hard to get this message out there. Yes, to women, but also to men. We must share our experiences with one another and continue to collaborate to ensure that victims or potential victims of gender-based and domestic violence are not further victimized by what amounts to bad politics. We must work to ensure that the Istanbul Convention is ratified by the European Union. Surely this is consistent with the value that underpins our union. On this, the 10th anniversary of the Istanbul Convention, I again thank Spain for this initiative. In particular, can I thank you, Arantxa, and Minister Irina, for the kind invitation to participate today. It's unusual that I'm the only male on the panel of speakers for any event, but of course I can understand why that's appropriate today. So I look forward to our further partnerships on this shared commitment to confront domestic and gender-based violence. It's such an important issue for all of our countries. Thanks very much for the invitation.
Muchísimas gracias, Simon, por tus palabras.
Thank you very much, Simon, for your words. Let me give the floor now to the Minister of State for Women Affairs and, of course, with the Presidency of the European Union, Mariana Vieira de Silva. You have the floor.
Dear Minister, for giving me the floor. Your Majesty, dear Ministers, dear Commissioner, honorable speakers and colleagues. I'm very honored to join you today. This is indeed an important occasion. 10 years ago, the Istanbul Convention opened for signature. Much has been spoken recently about the Convention. Despite all the backslides we have been witnessing, there are also voices that have been raised in favor of its standards and principles. And calls for the protection of women have been heard throughout Europe and the world. Nonetheless, all positive statements converge to the main goal envisioned by the Convention, inscribed in its preamble that I would like to quote: aspiring to create a Europe free from violence against women and domestic violence. For that reason, celebrating the Convention is of the utmost importance. Strong political commitments based on human rights and human dignity, such as living a life safe from violence, remind us that the biggest achievements are the ones we accomplish together, setting aside what divides us and focusing on what brings us closer. That is why we should spare no effort in highlighting and recalling the principles of the Convention of Istanbul. In the past 10 years, since we came together to adopt an international instrument set to prevent and combat violence against women and domestic violence, we have been paving an historic path built on commitment, confidence, and hope for all women. But as we look back on the historic path that we have decided to take, it looks like what seemed self-evident 10 years ago is not so clear today. It seems like the very core of the Convention is being disregarded. This is a strong legal framework designed to protect those in situation of vulnerability, to improve our policies, and to act comprehensively. Dear colleagues, Portugal was the first member state of the European Union to ratify the Convention. Since then, we have based most of our public policy responses in EU standards. Adding to the negative reactions and backslides, which are reason for concern and should not be overlooked, the pandemic only aggravated the challenges of ensuring safety for women. Helplines in many countries are a good example of what we can develop using the guidelines of the Istanbul Convention to support and offer advice to victims of domestic violence, nationwide, round the clock, and free of charge. During the confinement, these helplines were vital. As holders of the presidency of the Council of the European Union, we too committed to highlight the usefulness of this legal framework. Not only we marked the 10 years of the Istanbul Convention with a high-level conference, but we have continued the initiative started by the German presidency of a single number, Europe-wide, that redirects calls to national helplines. The Portuguese presidency has been actively engaged in making this a reality, and that is why, under our presidency, we have reached the minimum 14 required declarations of commitment by the member states in order to trigger the next steps and make this single number a reality in the European Union. Everywhere in Europe, women should have easy access to this important support tool, since in many cases, helplines are the first and the most immediate resource when faced with a situation of violence. To conclude, I would like to say that we all agree that gender equality is a precondition to a fair society. But it is only when we can live in a Europe with no fear, no victims, no insecurity, that we will be able to say that we have delivered on the aspiration of creating a Europe free from violence, a Europe that truly protects women, a Europe that is truly equal. The foundation to build this Europe build this Europe are already set. The Istanbul Convention has created the common basis for such a commitment. Let's go further by celebrating it and protecting it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariana. And then last but not least, the EU Commissioner for Equality, Elena Dalli. Commissioner, thank you very much for the efforts that you're leading to ensure greater gender equality in Europe. And you have the last and very forceful words in this panel.
Thank you, Your Majesty, Secretary General, Ministers, colleagues, friends. I thank the Spanish government for its continuous engagement and progress on combating gender-based violence and domestic violence. Spain has put this issue high on the political agenda since many years and has set an example in Europe. Spain has also signed and ratified the Istanbul Convention, which is the gold standard, as we have been hearing, to combat gender-based violence. This means that Spain and all other European countries that have ratified the convention agree that committing acts of gender-based violence are punishable by law and that all women victims of such violence must be supported and protected. All EU member states signed the convention. 21 member states have so far also ratified it. The Commission is fully behind the Istanbul Convention and encourages all member states to ratify it. We are also doing everything we can to finalize the EU's accession to the Convention. But we face obstacles, as you know, by some member states, mainly due to misconceptions around so-called gender-based ideologies and the fear that the convention would threaten traditional family values. Such arguments must be firmly rebutted. The convention has one sole purpose: to prevent and combat violence against women and domestic violence. And while we try to overcome these hurdles, thousands of women and girls continue risking their lives, because the dire figures show that 1 in 3 women have experienced physical or sexual violence, and 1 in 2 young women and girls have experienced online violence, including threats, sexual harassment, and the sharing of private photos without consent. The situation calls for urgent action. This is why the Commission is preparing a legislative proposal to prevent and combat violence against women and domestic violence in the EU. We plan to present it by the end of this year. We aim to be as ambitious as the Istanbul Convention within the limits of EU competence. So the initiative will cover gender-based violence against women and domestic violence, and with regard to prevention, protection, prosecution, and policy coordination. Apart from the legislative proposal, we will keep working with member states to implement the Victims' Rights Directive and the cross-border mutual recognition of protection orders. Fund projects tackling gender-based violence through the EU Citizens' Values Equality Programme, organize educational exchanges on ending violence against women and domestic violence, and collect reliable data through Eurostat on gender-based violence to be available in 2023. As stated in our gender equality strategy, which we presented last year, we will also set up an EU network on the prevention of gender-based violence and domestic violence to promote best practices and issue recommendations on the prevention of harmful practices such as FGM, honor-related violence, and forced marriage. The Commission is determined to address this widespread problem as a top priority. Both the High Representative Vice President Borrell and President von der Leyen, during her visit in Turkey, were very strong and clear in their call supporting the Istanbul Convention. And we will continue to support it together with you. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We've come to the end of this event. I think we leave this room, we leave this gathering with the conviction that we have to fight against the backlash, that we are determined to continue implementing the convention, and that we're going to do everything we can to bring members into the convention, including bringing back Turkey to its convention. También salimos de esta...
Yes, we will also be leaving this event absolutely convinced that misinformation and false arguments about this convention have to be rebuffed. And we have to do that with arguments and with figures and numbers and with success stories and tangible progress that show us that the existence of the international legal framework can actually improve the lives of women and girls, going beyond ideologies or public debates. Let's not forget that legal instruments like this will help us to continue to fight to ensure that we will be able to improve the lives of women and girls, and this will be a radical move. So Istanbul Convention saves lives.
Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias a todos y a todas. Y seguimos trabajando.
Everyone, and we will keep working for the convention. Thank you very much once again, everyone.
With us, and to those, para los que estamos acá.
Everyone who is here in person, thank you also very much for being here, particularly Your Majesty. I want to thank you for joining us.